Today's daf is daf Lamed Hey in Masechta Nazir. We're going to begin on daf Lamed Daled Amud Beis, about 10 lines from the bottom. Amar. Let's just briefly review what we discussed so far. We've discussed so far machlekes between Reb Lezer and the Chachamim. The Torah says that a Nazir is not supposed to drink any wine, and then it gives you details. What does it mean? Wine, old wine, new wine, vinegar wine, vinegar of old wine shouldn't drink, and that was let's say a limiting prohibition. Then the Torah says, "Mikoil asher yosim agapaniyayim." It's a non-limiting statement that anything that's coming from a vine tree, he cannot eat. So that includes everything. So Reb Lezer darshan that it includes even leaves. A leaf of a wine tree, a nazir is prohibited from. Comes along the Chachamim say disagree, because since the Torah goes ahead and gives another detail, mechatzan v'adzag, from pits and peels he shouldn't eat. So now we have details, general rule, details. So Chachamim learn that this is a prat klal prat, which means that we darshan that we only include things that are similar to any of the details. The details are basically part of the fruit of the tree, and therefore only fruits and similar to the fruit of the tree, which is the spoiled fruits, are also included in this prohibition. That's where we're up to over here, discussing what the Chachamim meant to include into this pasuk. The Gemara says like this: Amar, we learned Bav. This is the beginning of the wide lines of Daf Lamed Daled Amud Beis. Amar, we learned the Bav. Uma prat, just like the detail, meforish pri, upsilas pri, the details, the examples that the Chumash gives for a nazir not to eat includes the fruit and upsilas pri, and also the spoiled fruit. Afkoil, so what we're going to include and add on is pri, the fruit, upsilas pri, and the spoiled fruit. So what does it mean? Pri, what does the Torah say that a nazir is also? What type of fruit? Inve, grapes. Psilas pri, what is the spoiled fruit that the Torah says a nazir is prohibited on? Mahi, choimitz, that refers to vinegar. So the Torah gives you an example of a fruit and a spoiled fruit where a nazir is prohibited. Afkol pri, so we're going to add on something that's not written in the Chumash, mahi, and any fruit, goharki. Garki is a fruit that is not yet ripe. It's a very tiny fruit. So even that fruit that you plucked off the tree prior to it growing in size is already usher for the nazir. And afkoil, the psoilus pri mahi, what are we going to add from something that's spoiled fruit that's usher for the kohen, for the nazir to eat? Amrav Kana, that lesuya inve dichran, to include wormy grapes. You would think that wormy grapes, if a grape is infested with worms, it would not be prohibited for the nazir. So the pasuk says no, that even if it's not a edible, or if it's a spoiled type of fruit, we're including that into the isra for a nazir. Adzag, what does the Torah say? Mechatzanim ba'adzag, from the pits till the peels. What is that? What does it say? Until. Why don't you say mechatzanim and zag are prohibited? So Amarav Rina Lasui de Bein Habinaim. It includes something else, another detail, which we could add on, a fruit that is a grape that's growing amongst big grapes, which will never see the sunlight, and therefore this particular grape will never become ripe. Even that is also for a nazir. So not only a small grape that you picked off before it gets ripe is also to a nazir, but even a grape that would never eventually become ripe because it's wedged into other grapes, which is blocking the sun for that grape, and it'll never become ripe. That's also usher for the nazir. So that is how the Chachamim darshan the pasuk. But main thing, according to the Chachamim, it's not usher to eat the leaves of a grapevine, according to the Chachamim. Amamar, we learned before that the Brisa said about the Chachamim, maybe we're going to only add on if it's a complete fruit, and the detail we'll add is another complete fruit. But how do you know you're adding on to a boiser grape, an unripe grape, or a wormy grape? How do you know you're adding that on? Maybe it has to be so similar to the detail. So the Gemara says, Amrit, then what are you going to add on? What is the pasuk going to include that it's not mentioned in the pasuk? In other words, the details that are given by the nazir includes every type of possible grape. If it's regular grapes and dry grapes, which is raisins, that's what you're going to add on, that it's also for a nazir. That's written in the pasuk itself. Yain v'chaymitz. You can tell me it's also for a nazir to drink wine and vinegar. That's also written in the pasuk. So it must be. Don't say what you want to say, that it doesn't include boiser grapes or wormy grapes. You have to say, like we want to say in the originally, that we're adding on something that's not written in the Chumash. And what's not written in the Chumash? Boiser grapes and wormy grapes. So now the question is, so the other Gemara is just explaining the Brisa. Since we're going to add anything, that a nazir is also in all different types of grapes. Why does the Chumash put the last detail after the general rule? In other words, the pasuk should put bechatzan v'adzag when it's listing off the details. It should say new wine, old wine, vinegar, anything soaked in grapes, and regular grapes and dry grapes, and pits and peels. Why does it put pits and peels after the general rule? So Laima Lacha teach you if we would just write it that way, the detail and the general rule, then you wouldn't able to say add on. You wouldn't be able to say, oh, we're going to only add on things that are similar to the detail. We're going to say that the klal is just saying add on anything you want, as long as it's somewhat, similar. It doesn't have to be too similar to the prat, which means that it's like the Torah gives you details, and then the Torah gives you a general rule, and it's like et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you'll add on anything you want, even leaves. So therefore, the Torah didn't write it that way. The Torah was specific. First, it gave you a detail, general rule, detail. Until the Torah sets it up as it did by Nazir, where it's prat, klal, prat. When it's that situation, then you're only adding on similar to the detail, similar to the prat, but you're not adding on anything you want. So a prat and klal adds everything. A prat, klal, prat, you're only adding things that are similar to the prat. According to Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah in our Mishnah, he uses bechatzana v'adzak to teach you that in order to be a nazir to be chayev from pits and peels, he has to eat 2 pits and a peel. Okay, 2 pits and a peel. He just can't eat a basket of pits, or he can't eat a basket of peels. He has to have a mix, at least two pits and a peel. So according to him, bechatzana v'adzag is not extra. So according to Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, you have a limiting statement and an unlimiting statement. And then mikol asher yosem megafen hayayin. How could Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah align himself up with the Chachamim? So the first teretz of the Gemara, Savalak Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah darsh miyat v'riba, and that's correct. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah will hold like Rabbi Elazar, who darshaned miyat v'riba, that there is no extra detail, and therefore it's just a miyat, a limiting statement, and v'riba and a non-limiting statement. So we're marbe everything. We're marbe even leaves. So Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah will hold like Rabbi Elazar that even leaves are also for a nazir. If you want, I can tell you Rabbanan, he could even line himself according to the Rabbanan. And you actually learn 2 things. First, it's a detail, and plus you learn 2 pits and a peel. If it's only teaching you that you need 2 pits and a peel, then why did the Chumash put these details over here at the end after saying the general rule? Put it back in the beginning. Put it back over there in the beginning. By the details. Why did he write it after the general rule? So you should darshan it like a klal prat, or basically prat klal, prat, to say that you're only adding on things that are similar to the prat, basically anything having to do with the fruit of the tree, but not the leaves. So maybe this detail is only teaching you that idea, that you're only adding on things that are similar to the fruit of the tree. But how do you know it's teaching you also the other halacha that Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah learned out, that you have to have 2 pits and a peel? Okay, if it's only teaching you one thing, let the Torah write, say the words, express itself similarly by pits and peels. saying either pit, peel, or pits and peels, both in plural. Why did the Torah go out of his way and specially say mechatzanim, pits, v'adzag, until the peel? So it's a plural word for a pits and a singular word for peels. So you teaches you both dinim. Shma minor l'midrash be'ei klal prat. You darshan it like a klal prat to klal. It's teaching you that you have to eat 2 pits and a peel as well. So in other words, according to Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, he could even align himself up with the Chachamim. Now the Gemara asks a question. According to Rabbi Elazar, we just got through saying that he darshans this Nazir pasuk as if this detail, this last piece, mechatzan v'adzag, doesn't exist. So he darshans it miyut, a limiting factor, v'riboy, and an all-inclusive, non-limiting statement. So, but he, in other places in Shas, where there will be another detail afterwards, Rabbi Elazar would darshan in prat, klal prat. So in concept, he does darshan prat, klal prat, but here he doesn't by Nazir, he doesn't darshan it this way. So the Gemara wants to know, give me an examples of where Rabbi Elazar would darshan also prat, klal prat. Rabbi Elazar, the Darish Miyat V'Ribe, by Nazir, Rabbi Elazar darshaned it as Miyat V'Ribe, Prat Klal Prat Menole. We did Rabbi Elazar elsewhere in the Chumash would, in concept, agree to the Chachamim that if I don't need the last prat for a drasha, it would be not a Miyat V'Ribe, but we call it a Prat Klal Prat, and we will only add things similar to the prat. Amar Abba, the Gemara is going to give you 3 examples. Amar Abba, in the Chumash it says Nafkalei Mahai Pasuk says. The pasuk says, "Kiyitin ishas re'eu chamar shoyse." Torah says by a shomer. The Torah, the halachas of a shomer. The Torah says it applies by if a person will give to his friend a donkey, an ox, or sheep to watch. Right. So that's a detail. B'chol, it could be anything. And then the Torah says behema, animal, lishmor, to watch. So it's a detail, general rule, detail. So. And then the Chumash says that there's host halachas of a shomer chinam, shomer sacha, etc. So what does that prat klal prat teach you? You see an example from this pasuk. Prat, that's a detail. So you'd think it only applies to animals. B'chol means everything. Behema, chol is a klal. Behema lishmar, that's the way you're supposed to be garish in the Gemara. Chaz a parat. So prat klal prat. Prat klal prat. You have a prat and a klal and a prat. So you say you only the parshas of Shomrim is only by things that are similar to this details. What are the details? The details are things that are intrinsically have value, like an ox, donkey. It has a value for itself. Excluding, so we won't be darshan, let's say a shor, an ox, because we won't include a shtar, which is a IOU document. That's not in the parsha of Shomrim. Furthermore, it's also movable. Ox, donkeys move around. So in the parsha of Shomrim, does not include if the object that was given over for watching is a piece of land. So that's how you darshan. The parsha of Shomrim only includes things that are metaltalin and has intrinsic value, excluding shtar, which is IOU documents, or karka, land, which is not included in the parsha of Shomrim. So again, this is an example of where Rabbi Elazar would agree in concept, Yudarshan prat, klal prat. Rava says, I'll give you another example. Nafkalei Mahaikra, there's another pasuk in Chumash, Parshas Vayikra, the first parak, pasuk Ches. The im min. Let's see the pasuk again. The im min hatsoin karbonoim izin la'oila. Torah is talking about what animals you bring for a carbon oila if you want to donate a carbon oila. First, the Torah says the im min. That means a limiting factor. Hatsoin, it could be a sheep. Then the Torah says, I'll give you another example. Ksovim or mina izim, or a detail, which is sheep or goats. So the Torah goes out of its way to set it up as a prat, klal, prat. So we're going to darshan that it includes, let's read it inside. The imin, if it would just say bin, prat, I would say it's a detail that's very limiting, that you can't use an animal that's under 1 year old, that's over 1 year old, or has a blemish to it. Hatsoin, if the Torah says sheep, So klal, then I would say that's a general rule, which includes any type of animal, even if it's a blemished animal. You could bring it on the mizbeach. But then the Torah says sheep and goats cause a parat. So now it's another detail. Prat klal prat. So then we only going to be marba the types of animals that you could bring as a carbon oila, kosher animals, and it has to be it could be over 1 year old, but it can't have a blemish to it. So that's how Rava sees Rabbi Elazar also darshaning in concept the idea of prat klal prat. Amalei Rav Yehuda diskakro l'Rava. Rav Yehuda from Diskarta said to Rava, "Wait a second, you reached into a pasuk in pasuk Perak Aleph, pasuk Ches, but even the second pasuk in the Chumash in Parshas Vayikra, you already have that same idea prat klal prat." Learn it from this pasuk. It says min. Let's see the pasuk inside. So here the Torah says the same idea. If you want to bring a carbon, min, limited. Behema is all inclusive, so it probably means a behema would be not only an animal but even a wild animal. Min would only apply that certain types of animals, only domesticated animals. A behema would imply any type of animal, even a deer. Then the Torah says, no, min habaka ben hatzayin, it has to be from cattle or sheep. So that excludes a deer. So therefore, we darshan like this. We also have that idea. Min prat, behemas klal, baka v'tzayin chazo para, prat kal pra, yatadana ke'eda prat. When you have prat kal pra, you're going to only include things that are similar to the prat. So you're going to exclude a chaya, a deer, but you're going to include something, even an older animal, if it's older, even if it's older than a year, it's also good. So you see, even from a different pasuk, a pasuk that appears early in the Chumash, early in the one that Rava said, is also considered a good example of prat klal prat. So basically, Rav Yehuda Mediskakta is asking Rava, why did you go to pasuk Ches, the 8th pasuk in that Parshas Vayikra? Go to the second pasuk and you have the same idea, prat klal prat. Amalei. So Rava said, Min hai lek l'mashmimnei. The ima hasam. It's not a good example. From that example, havamina, I would think habehema. We go to Amud Beis. Chaya b'chal b'kema. I would think that when the Torah says when a min habehema, min haboka, min hatzayin, I would think that min habehema means min means an excluding factor, but it could be something excluding from a wild animal from domestic animal. But min would include both wild and domestic animals. And habehema would be more inclusive of all wild animals, all domestic animals. So it wouldn't be a good example of a prat klal prat. Amalei. So Rav Yehuda Diskra answers, chaya b'chlal behema. Is a chaya included in the animal of behema? Aksiv baka v'tzayin. That baka v'tzayin, the Torah says baka v'tzayin. V'havalei prat klal prat. V'yata can bring a prat. What Rav Yehuda Diskra said. Take a look at this end of the pasuk. This baka v'tzayin is clearly domesticated animal. So if the last detail is domesticated animals, the first detail min also only refers to domesticated animals because they have to be similar. The two pratim that surround the klal should be similar. Prat, klal, prat. So according to Yehuda Diskra, this would be a good example of prat, klal, prat, which you would darshan, even Reb Lezer would have darshan this idea of prat, klal, prat. But by Rava used this example, and we also have another example of there's also examples throughout the Chumash where even Rabbi Lazar would agree to the concept of prat klal prat, but only by Nazir he was pedantic and said, no, we're not going to darshan prat klal prat, but we're going to darshan miyut riboy and ignore the last detail because that we need for a drasha. So if it's a miyut riboy, we're going to darshan include leaves and leaves as also being usher, according to Rabbi Lazar, being usher for a nazar. Now the Gemara finishes up and says over here, how do you know there's a concept of klal prat klal in the Chumash? How do you know you darshan things that way? Give me an example of a klal prat klal. So I know we darshan klal prat klal, but I think what the Gemara is asking is, how do you know when you darshan klal prat klal, you could be marba things that are similar to the prat? maybe you could only be marba one thing. So the Gemara says like this: the Tanya we learned to the Brisa. The pasuk says when a person has ma'aser sheni money. Let's see the pasuk. You have ma'aser sheni money. Let's say you have ma'aser sheni. Instead of bringing the fruits up to Yerushalayim, you transfer the money, the kedusha of the ma'aser sheni over to money, and you started bringing the money up to Yerushalayim. So you have all this money, which is holy ma'aser sheni money. The Torah says you could purchase with that money anything you want. Just make a party in Yerushalayim. Anything you want. That's a general rule. The Torah gives examples: buy cattle, wine, or old wine. So that's a detail. Anything your heart desires, anything your soul asks for, you can purchase with the ma'aser sheni money. So what does that mean? You can buy anything you want with the ma'aser sheni money. Can you buy a pair of shoes with the ma'aser sheni money? So we have a drasha. That's a general rule. That's a detail. That's another general rule. So you have a general rule, detail, and a general rule. You can only add things that are similar to the detail. Just like the detail is explicit, something that grows fruit from fruit, like say, that's how it's created, not like salt or water. So it's a fruit that comes from another fruit, which is cattle coming from other cattle. So ugdule karka, it grows from the ground, which excludes like fruit. Cattle grow from the ground, wine comes from the ground, but fish don't come from the ground; they come from the water. So that cannot be purchased with ma'aser sheni money. You can buy anything that's a fruit and that grows from the ground. You can buy wine, as the Torah says, but you can buy any types of fruits, vegetables, and stuff like that. But you cannot buy wine, salt, water, or fish. So that is the example of klal prat to klal. So the Gemara understands that just like you darshan klal prat to klal, you're including things that are similar to the detail. So if you just have also prat klal prat, if you reversed it and you have just two pratim and one klal in the middle, you'll also darshan ke'ein haprat. So now the Gemara just asks 2-3 questions. Michte, let us see. Klal prat to klal, when you have a klal prat to klal, ke'ein prat dainidim. Then we adding things similar to the detail. Klal brasa mayahanele. What did the last klal accomplish? Shouldn't the last klal include everything? Answers the Gemara, no. Ahani like sufi called the domila. We're only adding things that are similar to it, because if you just had a klal and a prat, you would only add exactly those details. When the Torah will give you a general rule followed by details, the Torah may be specific to use only these details and nothing else. So now the Gemara asks in the other situation, Masu, another question I want to ask you. Prat, klal, prat. If you have a detail, general rule and a detail, can a prat they need it? Then you're also including things that are similar to the detail. What did you get? Why did the Torah gain by adding another detail? In other words, why didn't the Torah write it as prat the klal? So the Gemara explains, Ilah prat basra. We've seen this before. If we didn't add the prat coming after the klal, havemina nasa klal musaf ala prat, then I would say that I would think that the klal is only adding to the prat everything. So if you have a prat the klal, you just say everything you want is added to the situation that the Torah is talking about. So for example, if the Torah wrote all the details of Nazir and then followed it up with the general rule of Mikol Achiyasa Begefen, so Chatzan Vazag appeared earlier, then I would add everything. If the Torah put Chatzan Vazag up here, then I would say includes leaves and shoots of the tree, which are not fruits. So that's why the Torah put an extra prat to limit that things that you're going to add to that list. Now the Gemara asks, okay, you just told me klal prat to klal is the same idea as prat klal prat. So mikte, let us see. Trei klal prata, trei prata klali, kein prata denine. They're both the same, that you're going to only add something similar to the prat. So ma'ika beina beina. Why does the Torah write it some way klal prat to klal, and sometimes the Torah writes prat klal prat? So the Gemara says, Ika, there is a difference. The tartan klal prata. If there's two klalim and one prat, we'll add things similar to the detail, even if it's only has one common denominator. It's one similarity to the detail, we'll add it, include it into the list. But when you have trei prat klali, when you have two details and one general rule, it seems that the Torah is giving you more details to make it less inclusive, less more exclusive, which means i'ika prata, if the details, the dominant mishnei tzedadim is similar to it in two sides, marbrinam, then we'll add it into the group. But it has to have two similarities to the details, to the examples that the Torah mentioned. But if it's only similar in one way to the example that the Torah mentioned, loy merabinim, we will not add it on. So prat klal prat is more exclusive. In order to add things, it has to be similar to the pratim in two ways. If it's similar, it's like the prat it has two ways similar to the prat, we will include it into that group. Okay, one last question. Michte, let us see. Prat klal. If we just said prat klal, we said nasa klal musaf ala prat. Then you're telling me that the klal would add anything to the prat. So if the Torah wrote one detail and then a general rule, we'll add everything. Visrabi kol mili, and then we'll add everything we want. Umiyat veriba, if we call it, instead of calling it prat klal, detail and general rule, we'll call it miyat, limiting factor, veriba, and an all non-limiting factor. Name riba kol. When the Torah writes it that way, we will call it Yamarba everything. We include everything. Visrabi kol mili, and we're including anything into the concept that the Torah is talking about. So if you call it prat klal or if you call it mir riboy, it's both the same idea that you're going to be marba anything you want. So ma'ika be mir v'riba le prat klal. What would be the difference between mir v'riboy and prat klal? Answers the Gemara, Ika, there is a difference. Ili prat klal, if you call it a prat uklal, like a detail and a general rule, the general rule becomes like etc., 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 and you can add much more. Mirabina afil alam v'lulavim. If you call it a prat klal, then you would add even things that are non-edible. Alim here refers to leaves that are non-edible. But now that you call it miyut v'riboy, if you call it a miyut and a riboy, then you would only add on lulav and en, something, a shoot that's edible, alan leaves loy, not. So let's take a look at the example over here. If the Torah would have put chatzanim zag way up there by the details, and then you have it details general rule, if you call it a prat and a klal, I would be moisif anything. I would add anything, not just these details, but even unedible leaves and shoots, which are edible, are included in the things that are usher for a nazir. But if you call it a miyut and a riboy, which means that this is, instead of calling it a detail, but we call it a limiting factor, and this will be a riboy, which means a non-limiting factor, so then you're going to be more selective in what you're going to add on. Yes, it's non-limiting, but it's only things that are edible, but a non-edible leaf will not be included. Now, to point out that Rabbi Lazar called it a miyat v'riboy, and yet he is adding on leaves and shoots, leaves and lulavs. But yes, he said leaves, but he was referring to edible leaves. Edible leaves, yes, would be included into this miyat v'riboy, but Rabbi Lazar specifically said, I wouldn't include the bark of the tree, the bark of the vine, that's not included, or anything non-edible. So it all works out, even according to Rabbi Lazar, that calls this miyat v'riboy, as explained, because he just ignores this last detail because that's teaching you something else. So again, the Gemara just gave you three concepts, which are somewhat not familiar. The concept of prat, klal, prat, and then what's the difference between klal, prat, and klal, and the difference between prat and klal and miyat v'riboy. Okay, Be'ez Hashem, we'll go on to another topic tomorrow. Daf Hamid Vav.